This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Welcome, everyone. This is the 200th episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. And it's a major milestone for both the podcast and for me personally. And I wanted to start off by saying thank you. Thank you to each listener and thank you to each guest. Because without you, there wouldn't be a podcast. And I also want to say thank you to my husband, Jeff. He has always been there to support me. Even when I felt unsure, he's wiped away many tears and he's celebrated in all of life's major moments. Jeff is my cheerleader and he's my best friend. And together we have two adult sons, Liam and Ethan, and they have both been very supportive of me on my journey. And when I look back to the fall of 2017, that's when I was in my time in my life that I was scraping the bottom of shit barrel. You know, some people call it a dark journey of the soul, midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it. It really sucked. And in that time, all I wanted to do was just run away from the chaos that I had created because I felt so lost and completely alone. And, you know, it got so bad that I just wanted to tap out. But I knew that Jeff and the boys were counting on me. And it was in those dark moments that I completely surrendered myself to the universe. And I actually asked, I called out and I said, please just give me the one thing that I need to do so that I can turn things around. And it was in that moment of complete surrender that my life changed forever. And when I reflect on everything that I've been able to accomplish, I see a common theme woven in all of my choices. And that theme is courage. Because we can't change staying where we are. And we can't step out of our comfort zone without courage. For this episode, I'm trying something completely different. And I've invited several coaches and guests to a fireside chat to share stories and insight on courage. And I am both happy and honored to welcome Laurie-ann Sheldrick from episode 1, Christine Bizier of episode 24, Michelle Kennedy, 103, Jonathan McLernon. Now, his episode does not come out until January, but it will be episode 218. We have Melissa Mayer, episode 157, Dr. Margaret Evanow, episode 124, Angelika, Matev, episode 47, and episode 166. Also, a shout out to Jamie Walker, episode 171. And we also have Jeannie joining us. And unfortunately, I cannot remember your episode number, but I will put that in the show notes as well for people to link. So welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me. I've shared a bit about my courage story. So let's kick things off, going right back to the beginning, starting again with Lorianne.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be a part of the 200th episode and the first. Like, this just feels like such a complete full circle. So thank you and congratulations. 200 episodes is no easy feat. So I am really, really proud of you. So, courage. When you asked that question, I was like, oh my God, I'm 43 years old. I'm sure I've done a ton of courageous things. And I started to think of all of these examples that I can give and share. But honestly, I would say it was my first courageous act, because there's something so magical that happens to your life when you take this really big first courageous leap in your life, like as like a, grown up, like quote unquote grown up. When you're a grown up, something magical. All the other things that come after that are courageous, but they don't feel as hard as that like first one. So for me, I was probably 21 years old. I was a full-time college student at the time. I was full-time bartender and a full-time partier as well. And I was just hitting a rock bottom, like mentally, emotionally, physically, I was hitting a rock bottom. And I had just been evicted from my apartment. And like, I didn't know what I was going to do. And all I knew, one night I was on the bathroom floor. I had come home after like a night of not knowing how I even got home, and another hangover just coming. And I just sat there on the floor and I'm like, this can't be my life. Like, this can't be my life. And kind of like you, Lucy, I was like, all right, God, universe, Elvis, like, I don't know who's up there, but I need some help, because if you don't give me a sign, I'm not going to get up off this bathroom floor. Like, I really felt that. I knew that there would be a night when I just would not get up off that bathroom floor. So the next day I woke up and I just had this ping, and the ping said, pack up your car. It was this bright red, ugly, beautiful at the time, red Ford Probe. And I packed all my belongings in it, whatever I could. And I messaged my dad and I said, you're going to have to come and get rid of the rest of the stuff in my apartment. I'm leaving. I'm leaving the city. And I left my hometown. And I drove to where I live now. I'm back in Ottawa again after being in Saskatchewan for a few years. And I drove to Ottawa, and the only people I knew here were my aunt and uncle. And I got the help that I needed. And I started working with a therapist, and I started to make new friends, and I stopped drinking and I stopped partying. I took care of my depression, and I took care of my eating disorder. And I really did all the things that I needed to do, even though it was so hard and everything inside of me wanted to get back in my car and go home. It was my safety net. But I had to get rid of that safety net, because it was the only way that I was going to keep taking those actions and keep following those, little nudges to becoming who I am today at 43 years old. And that was my first courageous act, like getting my butt up off that floor after just saying, if I don't get a sign and then follow that sign, I'm not leaving this floor. Like, nothing could have gotten me to leave that floor without that like strong sensation that something better has to be out there for me. And then, like, I don't know, fast forward 23 years. And I am now the contagiously positive girl. A man that I worked with dubbed me effing contagiously positive. And I was like, who, me? I'm like, me? And it was all because of that first courageous act of just packing up my car and leaving and just creating a new life for myself. And it was courageous because I lost a lot of friends. My family was really mad at me. It was very, very difficult, but it was so worth it. It was so worth it. And I wouldn't be who I am today without that first courageous act.
Oh, you got me right in the feels there. Because and I can see it's the same dark place that I found myself in. So my one question to you was, what was that one thing after you had that first ping, that first thought? Because a lot of the times we get that, but then we sort of, like you said, we slip back into our comfort zone. So what was the thing that kept propelling you forward?
I was working with a therapist, and the biggest thing for me was I didn't want to die, but I knew if the pain didn't end, I would want to kill myself. There was no other option for me. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. I wanted to thrive, but I was in so much pain. And for me, that was the thing that kept me going. I just kept thinking, if I get the emotional and mental support that I need, the pain will end and I can live. That was it for me. It was literally survival. It was such survival mode. Like, everything inside of me, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, was in this state that you get in when you realize, oh my God, this is life or death. Yeah. And that's what kept me going. And it's even today, like, it just like you, Lucy, like this that lump comes up in your throat because you're just like so sad for that human being. I'm so sad for that young woman, you know, and I always think about like, just God, if I could go back to her today. And I mean, honestly, I'm a little bit woo woo. I do often, I go back to her and I'm like, I've got you now. Like, I've got you now, you know, like we're good, just because those are all the things I wish I would have, you know, been told then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that
You're very
very
welcome.
personal story.
You're
Definitely.
very welcome.
All righty. Miss Christine.
Thank you and congratulations. I teared up almost hearing 200 episodes.
I know.
That takes a lot of courage. We chatted about it today. But I wanted to share a little bit about courage in the sense of it's a hard question because I'm like, wow, you know, there's so many moments. I think I'm sure all of us, when you asked that question, had, you know, almost like a life review of all these really powerful moments. And one that stood out just in terms of the times for me right now, I think that's relevant. And something that I don't often hear a lot of people talk about is the courage to be seen. And so I grew up, I was always like super, super shy. Even as an adult, people would perceive it as like, oh, she's a snob. And, you know, family members would say, no, actually, she's really shy, because we all have this image we present, you know, to the world. And you never know what's going on in someone's life. You never know who they really are unless they're willing, able, and ready to be vulnerable and share that. And I had been doing my business part-time for many, many years, like over a decade. I always kind of hid under my business name. And when I say hid under my business name, I didn't post a lot of like photos of myself. And, you know, I started before, you know, the age of Facebook. I'll age myself. So it was never needed. And then there's this whole new world that started opening up where it was like, people want to see you. And I was redesigning my website a couple of years ago, and the web designer, she's fantastic. And she's like, well, what about pictures of you? You know, like you always do so much for other people. And I was afraid to be seen. And so something really simple like having a web page being created or being on social media and starting to share my passion, my gift, all of the things I love to do was really linked to who I am and a vulnerability to be seen. And so it was a really big journey to kind of dive deep and go through all of the process. And at the end of the day, it's a lot around judgment, you know, fear of, you know, being judged by other people, judging myself, you know, a million thoughts, you know, not being perfect, not being, you know, like, I don't know, like have wrinkles or whatever it is, like not having, you know, the perfect background. And I just kept getting these spirit messages that that's not what's really important. And it's not what I look for, but that was holding me back from sharing my passions, sharing my purpose, and really being vulnerable in a way that I think has probably been one of the toughest things, is to be seen, really to be seen and to be heard, and wanting to almost hide and blend and be behind the scenes, being okay with, you know, seeing other people and holding space for their vulnerability and their gifts. But it was interesting how life presents an opportunity. Something as simple as like a website design or, you know, launching something that can bring up all of these fears, all of these hidden things that, you know, it probably would take, you know, a lot longer than this episode to go into where it came from and finding the root of it. But at the end of the day, it was that inner journey that I had to really come to terms and say, okay, I have this passion, I have these things I want to share, and not being afraid to be judged, not afraid. And that for me is like a big, big courage. It's almost like, whoo, you know, feeling like really putting myself out there in a way to be vulnerable with people. And like you too, with sharing on a podcast and all of our stories, there's that sense of vulnerability. So that was a more recent version for me that really took me by surprise, because I've done a lot of inner journey work.
Okay, you just got me exactly where I am. And this may surprise people. I have no problems talking, but that being seen part, yeah, that's exactly, I'm going to say what I'm sort of struggling to overcome right now is that, you know, I'm doing all of these things and it's like, well, people want to know who you are. It's like, no, they don't. No, they don't. They don't need to know who I am, you know? And Yeah. Now we know what my next level of inner work is. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing, Christine. I appreciate that.
thank you.
Michelle.
Hello, Lucy, and hello, everyone. And I am so excited to be here and be part of this. And I find it interesting that the whole theme is on courage, and even just to share is something that we have to be courageous about. And whew, I'm already getting there. um, my most courageous moment was my rock bottom. Um, I didn't realize growing up that that I had a bad childhood or that it was a dysfunctional family. It just was the way it was. And plenty of my friends and neighbors had it way worse. So I just thought it was how things are. So from the age of 10, I had dabbled with thoughts and ideas of suicide. Um, and wow. But I persevered. I continued on, got into college, went to college, and I was in a good place. And at age 19, I was raped and boom, crashed down. So I was pretty much in my room, in my bed for a few days. I don't remember those few days, but friends came and got me and said, you need to come out and we're taking you to psych services. And that is the beginning of the journey. Like, Lorianne, you really hit me. Um, going to psych services, getting like rape crisis help and support, and realizing at that age, like, your family is kind of messed up, and this is not normal. So I was in therapy for several years in a row at that time, and um, around age when I was getting near graduating college, my whole goal was to move out. I have to get out of this toxic family, this toxic home. And so I did not have a job. I had a job in college, and I did not go for a job in my field because that job in college was waiving the money that I would need to move out. So I stayed and and moved out on my own, and I shocked my mother, who thought I would be there forever. Um, and I just made it, and every moment since then has been like that decision to leave and to survive and persist. Um, and as dark as that moment was at age 19, it really helped open my eyes to everything in my past. And even though I didn't ask, like, give me a sign or help me out, it just did. Um, and got me on a path of healing and believing in myself and self-worth and self-actualizing and confidence. So um, and I think it was Laurie-ann said it, looking at yourself. I just had a moment like that this week where I looked in the mirror and I saw my eyes, and they were like really clear blue, which I haven't seen that in myself in a really long time. And I broke down in the mirror and I said, we're okay. We're okay. We're going to be okay.
Oh, I think you got everyone there. Thank you for sharing. And I'm starting to see that, it's easy to look at all of our pictures, whether we're on Instagram or Facebook, and we see the happy smiling faces. But I think it's really hard for us to realize that there's a story behind those eyes. There's a story behind that smile. And it isn't always, unicorns and rainbows, that we've all had our struggles. that's why I find it so important that we come together in groups like this and share, because, you know, Michelle, you heard some of your story in Lorianne, and I'm sure Lorianne's hearing some of her story in you. And it's that, hey, wait a second, I'm not alone. Michelle, I've also been, and I don't want to use the term victim, I've also experienced sexual assault. And I know how it tears apart at your sense of self. And to even begin to rebuild yourself back from that, it's, yeah, just to get out of bed in the morning and brush your teeth is a courageous act. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I just want to add something.
Absolutely.
Normally, I am able to talk about it without so much emotion. Um, my grandmother is in hospice right now, so it's really like the emotions are right here for me.
Chaos. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So thank you.
I don't, there's nothing wrong with showing our, and again, that's something that we don't do. We don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to share our emotions. And, you know, I can see the look on everyone's face, and everybody, you know, is feeling what you're feeling. And we're all, you know, I think it's just all creating a safe place for people to share and be authentic and share in their emotions and to offer their support to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan, our God love him. Talk about courage. The one guy.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, you know what, I feel honored to be on here as well. And you know, I already feel like the emotions of everyone's stories as well. And in thinking about courage, you know, often my first thought goes back to, I've been a victim of a violent trauma as well. And that really put me on a path, like a self-destructive path, where, you know, I actually forgave the perpetrators, but I had a hard time forgiving myself, and it felt like my body had betrayed me. And I really, you know, I became morbidly obese. I became a binge eating food addict. And you know, really started to hate my body for what was happening to it. And but you know, this isn't even really, I guess, the heart of the story in one sense. But that's what led me into a business relationship with somebody who I looked up to and admired, and who had all of the appearances of being highly successful. And because I had such a low sense of self-worth, and he appeared to be everything that I was aspiring to be in terms of success in business, you know, I bought into the business and was a part of it, and didn't realize that I was going into business with a narcissist and a sociopath who was a pathological liar, and everything was a shell, and it was for him to create write-offs for another business. And he was just gradually dumping more and more of it onto my plate, and I was just sinking, and I didn't really see a way out of it. And you know, actually the only way out was when a bailiff showed up, and I had to put a lock on the door, and I had to walk out of that. And at that point I realized there is no going back. There's a lock on that door, and everything I've put in this business, the years, the time I sacrificed away from my marriage, my own personal health that I sacrificed, put hours in this business to try to build it. It was all a sham. And now I got to go home to my wife and try and explain that our life savings are gone, and there's a mountain of debt. And how do you build back from that? And so I think it was also a really good time that I had a really powerful coach in my life, and he was modeling for me what compassion actually looks like. I needed to learn what self-compassion really looked like, because it doesn't get talked a lot about in especially in the masculine realm, self-love and self-compassion. And so I couldn't speak highly enough to the value of having a good therapist or a coach or a professional in your corner who can guide you through something like that. And so at that point, and I was thinking about, you know, Lorianne talks about losing the safety net. I'm like, you know, I was kind of trapped in this business. Maybe I just was holding on to this idea that somehow something's going to work out and some sort of miracle was going to save this business. You know, that didn't happen. And then Christine talked about the vulnerability of being seen and becoming the focal point. And I look at the patterns of behavior in my life, and I have a historical pattern of like hiding in the shadows and elevating everybody but myself. And so really to have the courage to start a business that was my business, that somebody wasn't going to take away from me, and I was going to become the focal point of that business. And I remember when I told my story, I was terrified to publish this on social media, like imagining how everybody was going to judge me when I told people that I'm not a fitness model on Instagram. I'm a guy who lost 100 pounds, but I still have loose skin. I don't look like a lot of these people, taking their beautiful, perfect photos on Instagram. And so I somehow thought that would disqualify me for the type of work that I was doing. And instead, the response is really quite phenomenal. And people realize that you're a human and you understand our struggles. And so I think there's just so much value in being willing to be courageous and be vulnerable, because other people see that, okay, we're not alone in this. And it isn't about having this perfect image we see on social media. And it's actually why I very recently rebranded my own podcast. It's now called Between the Before and After. And it's about telling people's stories. And I'm hearing all these stories, and I'm like, okay, I need all of you to be guests on my show at some point as well. Because I just love sharing the stories of human beings overcoming, huge obstacles and creating triumph in their lives and really encouraging people to move forward. So I really appreciate being a part of this.
Thank you, Jonathan. As a mother of two young men, I'm told constantly about how hard it is for men in particular to share, because society doesn't like men to be vulnerable. They don't like them to talk about their feelings. And guys can get bullied for stuff like that. So, kudos to you for sharing your story and for being so authentic in sharing, that business struggle about how you're showing up online and how you might be judged, and realizing that that difference that you have not being that fitness model probably makes you even more relatable, because other people can see themselves in you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't talk enough about it as men. I don't think we have enough positive masculine role models where, my wife used to call me the Tin Man, because I also used to just push all the emotions down. And, I think it was after, I'd finally reached my breaking point that I was like, I need to tell you how I feel. And she didn't reject me. I had this idea in my head that I was going to be rejected as a man or seen as weak. What, feelings and emotions are what make us human, whether, whatever we are, we're human. And it's so important that we recognize it doesn't weaken us at all.
It's so true. And, working together, we can hopefully support more men in sharing their authentic voice.
Absolutely.
Melissa.
Thank you, Lucy. And oh my gosh, these stories are amazing. I'm just loving being a part of this incredible conversation. And thank you, Lucy, for creating this space. These miraculous stories are amazing. So when you wrote about courage and to think about it, the first thing that came to my mind was I donated my kidney to my husband in 2018. And just, having surgery, I'm a highly sensitive person, and I work in, holistic healing. So I pride myself as a really healthy person. So just to have, someone cutting into my body and just kind of facing, my husband and all he had to go through with, and having small children, I was thinking maybe that was my courageous act. But then I was thinking, I think a lot of people, when they face hard times or health crises, you do kind of go into like an automatic mode, like an automatic survival mode. So then I was thinking I wrote a book about the experience, and almost how that required almost more courage, because that wasn't so automatic and so assumed. The transplant we had to get through. I mean, it was a survival game, and, we did it. And thank goodness we survived and we thrived. But the book was writing about it and having the courage to tell our story and really put it out there took, I think, even more courage, because it wasn't automatic, and it was optional. And there was so many times I was like, really, am I really going to do this? I mean, just like taking it seriously and just thinking that, is this really going to happen? Is this really going to be something that I'm going to do? Just took a lot of courage every day to show up and say, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but today I'm going to write, and tomorrow I'm going to write, and I'm just going to keep going at this one step at a time. And I had to face the voices in my head that said, you're not a writer, you're a physical therapist. Like what, or you're not creative. And how can you create something like this? And just facing those voices day in and day out. And eventually, they got so much better. And I just was like, all right, been there, done that. I've heard you guys a million times, and I'm just gonna keep going. I'm just gonna, I think someone else was talking about just persevering and just, and that took courage. And I felt really proud of myself. And I said, you know what, one day when I hold this book, or if somebody else reads it, no matter what happens to it, I'm going to just feel this really incredible sense of satisfaction that I did it, and I feel that to this day. I just feel like no matter what happens, I'm proud that I told my story, like Christine was saying about being seen. I had to just put it all out there and be very seen. And I said, it's okay. Just put it out there and be seen and be vulnerable and tell some of the battles that you faced, just growing up, and insecurity and eating, and even stopping drinking, like Laurie had mentioned, and just putting that all out there and having the courage to just face it in the book and put it all out there. And I'm really grateful for that process and that opportunity to demonstrate courage.
Well, writing a book certainly does take courage, because I've planned mine. It's as far as it got, because it's really hard. And you're committing something to paper. I don't know why I think writing a book is any more concrete than, being on a podcast and saying the same things. I don't know why a book for me just feels so much heavier to do. So, congratulations for you for doing that. And thank you for sharing your story, because I know there's probably quite a few people in our group that want to write a book. They're still just trying to figure out how to take that first step. So I'm sure there's going to be a few people knocking on your door looking for advice and help on that.
Anytime.
Fantastic. All right. Dr. Margaret Evanow.
Hello.
Hello.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
200. Yay.
Yay.
Look at you. That's a book. It's 200 pages, right?
Yeah, well, that's
You've
okay.
made a book here.
Kristen and I were talking about the book earlier on today, so you'll hear more about that, everyone.
Okay, sounds good. So I know when you asked us to think about courage, the first thing that came to my mind was not necessarily just my own example of courage, but all of the people that I've worked with over. I started in some form of mental health since I was 19. And I've been in counseling, I've been in clinics, I've worked in schools to help youth. I'm doing coaching as well now. And I've worked with thousands of people across all of those years, because I'm probably the oldest here. Nice hair color, but there's a lot of gray in there.
I don't know. I think we're close in age.
So I was thinking about everyday courage, right? That just regular life requires us to bring something to the table in order to actually do something more than just breathe, get up, drink the coffee, shuffle off to work, crab in traffic, not like our boss, come home, drink something else, eat some food and go to sleep, watch some TV. In order to really show up in life, it takes something. We have to bring something to the table. There's a book called Everyday Trauma. And most of us, the people that have shared already, maybe all 100% of us here have had trauma in our life. The statistics aren't pretty. 1 to 10% of children are raised in families that have optimal parenting or are downright not functioning well, right? That's 99% of us to somewhere to 90% that are in homes that just really can't help us thrive rather than just learn how to survive. 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 5 to 7 boys are sexually assaulted by the time that they're 18. The ACEs study, if anyone's familiar with that, it's a phenomenal long-term study that took lots and lots of people from Kaiser Permanente and looked at on 10 different things that happened before they were 18. And they were things like parents divorcing, things like seeing someone hit in your family, hearing bad words said either to someone else or to yourself, seeing a weapon, seeing violence, someone going to prison, someone with mental health problems, right? That's what we're all talking about right now. We've all had those kinds of things in our life. As we get more and more of those, it gets more and more difficult to be healthy. It gets more and more difficult to actually not just repeat what we have lived and learned. So that's what we're dealing with as human beings every single day.
I had no idea of
It's not
those.
a pretty picture when you think
No,
about
when you
it,
look
is
at
it?
it, I mean, it sort of brings a new definition to the 1%.
Right.
That if you were fortunate enough to be raised in a home that, you know, did have that optimal parenting.
Right.
I mean, I kind of hope that my kids fall into that 1%. I'm quite honest with them because, you know, I think once you kind of go through this, you know, journey, like all of us have been through, you sort of, if you have children, then you know, for me at least, I'm very open, and I've said to them, I'm like, yeah, there is a point in my life where I just don't feel that I was a good enough mother because I wasn't capable of it. But once I got better, I started to be better and I started to do better. And I think that's all that we can hope for, is that, you know, once we acknowledge that there is trauma at some point in our life, whether it happened when we were 2, 22, or 42. And I'm hearing everybody's basically saying, you know, at some point you hit a sort of level of rock bottom. You acknowledge where you are. You have to make a decision, live or die. And pretty much everybody had to seek some sort of outside help, that beacon, that guiding person to help them through the journey. And I think that's where, you know, a lot of coaches come from, is that when they've been through hell, they look back and they help the next person coming through it. Because, and that was, you know, one of the reasons why I started the podcast in Nectar, is I remember those dark moments and how alone I felt. And I'm like, if I can do anything to stop somebody else being stuck there, then that's what I'm going to do. Whether it's, you know, I touch the lives of one life or a million lives, it doesn't matter. It's just that need to give back and to help and to do whatever I can to help somebody else. But also acknowledge I still need a lot of help. I am still dealing with stuff that I don't know how to deal with it on my own. And I work with different coaches, different people to help me in different ways, because, you know, I was slow to learn, but I can't do it alone. I tried that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. But I say I used to be a slow learner because I've realized it can't be anymore.
Yeah.
I've got to move forward.
Yeah. You know, when we took all of our statements collectively, listening to everybody, I wrote down the little vignettes of what courage was. And Laurie-ann, you said that you had the courage to have to face the pain so that you could survive, that you could actually learn how to live. And I loved the idea that you said ping. And I'm a quantum psychologist, so that means something to me. So that was fascinating. But someone else said the courage to see ourselves in other people. Someone else said the courage to make a decision to really survive, and that required them to reach out. Courage to see ourselves. Look in the mirror and see your beautiful blue eyes, Michelle, right? I mean, just see ourselves. You know, we look at people all day long and we can have compassion for them. We can care about them. We can, you know, oh, come on, you can do it. We can support them. But when we look in the mirror, most of us are really unsettled by looking into our own eyes and saying, hey kid, how you doing today? Right? Because we see how we're actually feeling and what we're actually experiencing in that moment. Um, Someone else said the courage, I think it was you, Jonathan, the courage to forgive yourself. That takes a lot. We're often easier on other people than we are on ourselves. The courage to do what we are called to do despite not being perfect. You know, I've never been perfect. I told my daughter, I said, I was never that size that you are. I came out of the womb bigger than that. Uh, it just is what it is. But the courage to still be okay with ourselves, right? The courage to birth something into the world, whether it's a book, which is a creation, whether it's a child, whether it is a new version of ourselves, and just to face life. I mean, if we look back on the last year and a half, we've had to have some courage. This is totally uncharted territory. We don't know how we're all going to deal with this and the fallout of what we've been through with this pandemic. So the courage to just be alive. But I would love to say not just the courage to survive, right? We have an innate wired drive to survive. We'll come through fire. We'll lift up buses if we have enough adrenaline in us to save ourselves or save someone else. But what about the courage to actually thrive, right? To be the best you can ever be. I think that takes the courage to be seen at a very, very naked kind of way, opening yourself to letting people see who you really are, that you're not perfect, that you haven't had all the, amenities of life, that you've come through something and you are still in love with yourself and in love with being alive. And that takes some courage, and we have to do it every day. It's a decision, I think, every day.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you for summarizing everything so far. Yeah, it's definitely some words of wisdom that we can all take from that. Definitely. Angelika.
Well, Lucy, congratulations. You're amazing. I love and admire your fire, your enthusiasm. You're such an inspiration. 200 episodes, that's amazing. And thank you for bringing us together today. Amazing stories. And I was really touched by everything I heard. Just on a very personal note about me, because I guess everyone is sharing something about their own experience with vulnerability. And of course, I had mine shared too. So a recurring theme in my life was starting over. Ever since I can remember, I had to go through a fresh start, new beginning, because I had to move through countries, continents, begin and build new lives. And that requires a lot of courage. And we all know that change is an integral part of life, but it's one thing to think about it. It's another to have to go through the transition and everything that complete change of circumstances brings. So I had to learn a lot, different languages, develop different cultural identities, living in North America, Europe, Africa. And every time I had to adapt and be ready to face whatever the unknown had for me in store. So I think that helped me definitely with my own empowerment and with every decision I made. And these weren't each of them easy decisions because I had to settle. But when I finally did, moving here to Spain, a few years later, my husband at the time was diagnosed with brain cancer and he passed away a few months later, and 2 weeks later, my mother passed away. So I was in a very dark and difficult place at that time because I was all alone in another country at a point in my life where I didn't really have any reasons to believe that there is something good coming up soon. So all the courage that I was able to find in myself at that time, I needed it, and I used it, and I committed to continue because I knew that there is a lot for me still to do, experience, and give. So I went through the courage of deciding to build a business around a discipline that is not very mainstream, psychological astrology. And that took courage as well. So I just knew that this is the only way for me to live and be authentic and feel happy and aligned with who I truly am. So what I do brings me joy, and that of course transpires in everything that I have to offer and the way I help the people I work with. So everything I heard so far, I think we can summarize with one word: authenticity, because being really ready and have the courage to show, be visible, to show ourselves, be visible, share who we are with the world, be vulnerable and ready to give birth to everything that we have as potential is courage, but it comes from an authentic place. And that in astrology is very connected with the sign of Aries and the ruling planet Mars, because they have to do with strength, courage, and the ability to fight for what we believe in. And it's interesting how it all ties up with change, because it's not just that particular energy and archetypes that have to do with courage. Every single sign is connected to some part of our psychological structure, and whatever we have to experience, we need to be strong enough to face it and to find the best place to express who we are, and the best way to, like Melissa, I think, said, not just to survive in a given situation, but to take the most advantage out of it and to thrive. And I think that in the 21st century right now, we know that a lot of changes are happening. And for those of you who are more interested in this topics, we did have certain important transits. People talk about the age of Aquarius, the sign that was hosting a lot of important energies lately. And this is how we see that the world will never be the same. And we are now in a very different kind of energetic environment, individually and collectively. So we learn a new sense of community, economy, reasons to give, ability to understand and support each other. And I think this is the new spirit of human evolution. So every one of us is working in that field one way or another, changing the world one person, one client at the time, because I guess we chose this to be our path and our purpose. And it's amazing how many people are actually responding to this new kind of energy. And I'm so glad to be part of it with my work and with the connections I can make with so many wonderful people such as yourselves. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Angelika. I've had the opportunity to work with Angelika on my own birth chart, and I have to say, her wisdom and knowledge in interpreting my birth chart has given me such clarity on my journey. It was, Lorianne talked about that ping when Angelika explained certain things about my birth chart to me. It was like, oh, that's why that happens. And it just, I don't know, it was nothing like anything I've done before, but the understanding, the clarity that it gave me was, it just gave me a quantum leap on my growth journey. So very, very valuable information. And I highly recommend anybody diving into that aspect of it for themselves.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you for saying that. It's true that, astrology is still a controversial subject, and a lot of people don't really know what to make of it. But like I said before, I work with a relatively new discipline, which integrates other modalities, along with astrology, psychological perspective added to what the traditional model has to offer, along with counseling and inner work and coaching. So it's all a tool, a system to help us on the journey of self-discovery, because this is where the truth lies within. So discovering
Definitely.
that and feeling empowered that we are, in fact, creators of our reality, and character is indeed fate. So that is a big breakthrough in understanding what to do next. So yes, I'm happy to have the chance to work with so many people that understand the value of it. So thank you for acknowledging that.
Thanks, Angelika. Now, Miss Jamie, my former co-host.
Oh man, so incredible to be here for the 200th episode. Just 3 years ago, sitting in your basement in the first couple
Day
episodes that we did.
after a tornado or
a
whatever
little-
it was.
Hurricane, tornado. Oh yeah, it was
Chaos.
absolute chaos. And yet so incredibly calming and affirming. I want to say thank you to all of everyone here for sharing your deep, amazing, incredible stories. What a lot of this boils down to for me for courage is it's that the power of going inward to understand your own truth and the courage to bring it back out. This is actually a newer journey for me. We talked about it a little bit, Lucy and I, but recently I was hit over the head with some messages, things like, you help this world by just being authentically you. And when you're authentically you, you encourage the rest of the world to do it too. We're all doing this work and encouraging it.
And yeah, that's my goal with,
and in that,
with the,
that's where you get your deep connection that I
Yeah.
really, truly think that we're starting to learn that we as
yeah, and
So-
that's the whole purpose behind the podcast and Nectar is to be able to create those safe spaces so that we can show up as our authentic selves, and then in doing so helping other people to realize their own truth and live their own authentic selves. Because I don't know, I think our world needs a lot more healing, a lot more help. Jeannie,
Hi.
how's it going? Did you want to share anything on courage or share your own courage story?
Well, I didn't plan my own story, but as I'm listening to everyone here, there's a piece of all of you in me, and my, Margaret, Dr. Margaret was saying she might be the oldest one here. I may very well be the oldest one. You'd be surprised. I was just talking to my husband last night, born in the 60s, right? So it's like, I'm like, it is 2021. But I look at like Michelle's story, and she mentioned she was raped at 19. Same. Date raped in college. I was also sexually assaulted on the job when I was the director of human resources. I was thrown into a hotel room. And some of these things, I would just literally brush myself off and go, okay, well, that was yesterday. Learn from it. Don't get in that situation again. But until this just 1 hour we've spent together, I'm thinking, Jeannie, have you really ever stopped to realize all that you've been through? And maybe I look back at my life and say it was courageous and I just move on. Or maybe I hid it all under a rock, right? And just was like, well, put your big girl panties on, you got to do what you got to do. What was it? But I think of that serenity prayer, and I'm not very religious, but this has taken me through my whole life. Have the serenity to, you guys know it. I know you know it. Courage to know the different, or it's what? Courage to change the things you can. Serenity to, see, I don't even know it right now. And
Something
courage
to know the difference.
Yeah. And I think just really understanding what do you have control over and what can you make a difference with? And that's where I would focus my energy and and my abilities. And like all of you coaches and doctors and counselors, we've helped people through so many things. And you were saying if as coaches, all the thousands of people that we've helped in our lifetime, and if I didn't have friends that played that role when I was 19, or, I have your name right here. Laurie was mentioning her rock bottom. If I didn't have friends who drug me out of those parties when I grew up in LA, who knows what have happened, right? So, and the statistics, Dr. Margaret, that you mentioned blew me away. Like, I realized, Laurie, I too had a dysfunctional family. Like, and same as you, I was growing up thinking this is just the way it is. It's not dysfunctional. You look back and say somebody who, Laurie got out of town, right? I was like, I got to get out of San Diego. I got to LA. I moved to San Diego, never went back because I needed to create my own life. I mean, so that was very courageous for just realizing maybe not what we wanted in life, but certainly what we didn't, and making the change and establishing a life to support what we didn't want based on how we were raised. And for those of us who are parents, like I want to be that 10% as well. I can tell you, my son's in the other room right now. He's 11, and he told me last night, Mom, you're the best mom in the world. You're the most caring. You're the most kind. You're the most generous. You're most loving. And I'm like, keep telling me that. Even when you're a teenager, keep telling me that. So I think for everyone who's listening and everyone here that I've had this honor to spend this last hour with and see their smiling faces, such beautiful people, just know that you don't have to live in your past. And it was yesterday. And I did learn from everything. Oh, there she is. I wanted to tell her, Melissa, my husband had donated his kidney to his father. And so he's had some medical issues because he only has the one, and it's scary. So thank you for doing what you did for your husband. I mean, that's amazing. Whoever can donate. I'm a regular blood donor. So I'm going tomorrow morning. I'm on like the Gallon Club. Apparently I've saved like 87 lives in my donations. And that's the one thing I can contribute. And it takes a lot of courage to go get that bigger needle. That's a big needle to drain a pint. But what my point was, anyone who's listening, know that you don't have to live in the world that you are raised in or the world that you're in. You can make a change. I happen to be a leadership coach and consultant, and I've worked with thousands of leaders in my HR career. You don't have to stay in a job if you don't like it. And I know there's this great resignation right now, and they're leaving for a variety of reasons, but leave for a reason that's really important to you, and find what's important in your soul and do that. Because all of us on this call are doing what sets our soul on fire. And I'll tell you, that's what gets us out of bed in the morning. And have I had bouts of depression? Luckily for me, very minimal, like a 3-day binge type of thing in my life. But I know a lot of people who've gone through extremes, and it's hard times. So just do what sets your soul on fire, because then it's exciting to get up in the morning and help others.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said, Jeannie. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we've heard from everyone. Did anybody want to add any other comments or share anything else before we wrap up?
Well, I was just going to say, like I think I must have grown up in a really like nice family and sort of grew up in a small town and stuff. But in the work that I do, so I'm a weight loss coach in a sense. I'm a nutritionist, but I wish I could just say side effects might include weight loss, because I say that nutrition is the cover story. I meet people where they're at. They come to me and say they want to lose weight, and that's a starting point. And okay, but inevitably we're gonna figure out what the real story is, and it's almost always some sort of difficult background. And I feel like I wish I could say that I was surprised at some of the things that I've heard here, and sadly I'm not, because of all the stories I've heard with. I work primarily with females. I didn't set out to do that either, but it seems like females are more willing to put up their hands and say I could use some help. And I suppose I'm in the minority of males who has a bit of an EQ and in touch with my emotions, and so it seems to work well. But it's just it speaks to a significant need for change in terms of men and how we define masculinity. And so that's one of the things that inspires me to want to be. I have an 8-month-old son, and I'm like, what sort of masculine behavior am I modeling for him? I mean, I love being male. I love having masculine energy. It's wonderful, but I really, we need more voices that are willing to stand up and be a voice for what positive masculinity is and looks like.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, maybe we'll have to have another fireside chat with just the guys. Get them all talking and sharing their vulnerability. You going to be up for that one, Jonathan?
100% I would. Yeah. These days I am now. I think I've shared my story enough times now that it gets a little bit easier each time. So
it does. It does. Excellent.
I'd love to just share one thing because it just comes up. I have like I was saying at the beginning, like I only work with women. And one of the things that comes up so often is this like pressure to perform. We want to be really unique, but then we're begrudged and judged for too unique, and we go against the grain. And one of the things that I just want to say to everyone here and everyone listening is like, we've been talking about the courage to be authentic. There's nothing more abnormal, which is so crazy to me, than being our authentic selves. Like it feels so abnormal to be our authentic selves. And it does take courage. And I think it's so important nowadays to show up however you want to show up. And that takes a lot of courage because there's always going to be someone there just ready to be in the comments and type at all the reasons why your practice is wrong, your ideas are wrong, your beliefs are wrong. And that takes a lot of courage to say, you know what? I am going to put all of that aside and I am just going to show up as me with my message, my voice, my beliefs, my ideas, my practices. And I'm just going to trust that it's going to get to the correct person, because the only thing we can be is ourselves. And it's just unfortunate that being ourselves is put into the category of having to be courageous, right? Like we should just all be authentic, and being our authentic self will feel abnormal, but it actually ends up becoming freeing, because the more we become ourselves, the more emotionally and mentally free we feel. So even though it's really difficult to, be judged for being our authentic selves, it's more difficult not to be. So you might as well just take that courageous act right away, because then you're going to wait 20 years later, you're going to do it anyway. So you might as well do it in the next 20 minutes, because you're going to do it eventually. Because eventually, I mean, I'm sure all of you know, once you hit your 40s, once you're in your mid 40s, you're just like, screw it. This is who I am.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, I've experienced trying to live up to somebody else's expectation of who I should be. And that led to depression. Mm-hmm. And when I started showing up authentically, like you said, I was completely free. But not everybody accepted me.
No.
The difference was that I was strong enough to not give a shit. Yes. I mean, there were still emotions I had to work through, but ultimately it's like, but I don't want to go back to being the person you think I should be and being depressed. I like me. If you don't like me, that's okay. You don't have to love me. You don't have to accept me. You don't even have to like me, because I love myself.
Absolutely.
That is amazing.
So much courage. Yeah.
Angelika knows the chaos I've been through.
That is amazing. And if I can just say something here, because I'm sure we all heard that saying that courage doesn't mean absence of fear, right? So it's totally normal to feel anxious, nervous, scared, but do it anyway. So I think that this is something we've all experienced, and that actually gives the real value of real courage. Otherwise, it would be too easy if we're not afraid of what we have to face and do. So a lot of that fear comes from the baggage we carry around from the past. And when you said that, Lucy, I thought of it, because tomorrow is a special full moon, and I'm saying this as an astrologer and someone attuned to the nature cycles. And even if you don't follow that, I think it's a good place to mention that this specific energy calls for letting go. So it would be a great time to have the courage to let go of all thinking patterns, behavioral patterns, habits, beliefs, and ways of sabotaging ourselves, because letting go takes an effort and it's not easy, but if we put our mind to it and decide that the time has come to finally break the negative repetitive cycles of certain experiences, the first step is to be ready to get rid of what no longer serves us so we can make space for what really matters, which is always better and more authentic because it comes as the product of our own experience and personal wisdom. So thank you.
If I might chip in here, I think all of us, if I'm getting it correctly, we're all involved in some kind of coaching, mentorship, leadership sort of capacity here, and so it might sound like very familiar language for us to talk about being our authentic self or living true, but for the average person who might be listening to this, they might be like, well, what the heck does that look like in real life? And so. In my experience, it was really about becoming clear on what my most important core values are. And those two are compassion and integrity. And so, because being authentic doesn't mean being a jerk to people, because that's quote unquote who you are. But I think really understanding what are the core values that drive you to like be the highest version of yourself. And so for me, I look at my behavior now instead of through the lens of other people's opinions, through the lens of compassion and integrity, and say, and all my other values kind of stem from those two, and say, did I act in accordance with those two core values today? And it's not that I do it perfectly, but that's what I use as a guide, and it's no longer a moving target. So it's a lot easier to be true to myself in that way.
Yeah, good point. We often forget that some of the language that we use may not, other people might be sitting there scratching their heads. I mean, certainly me 5 years ago would be going, what are you talking about being authentic? Like, I am me, but you're right. It's a different sort of level. So thank you for providing that clarification, Jonathan.
And if I may, I have a magnet on my refrigerator, and it says, life begins outside your comfort zone. And it was a quote by Neil Donald Walsh, who, I love, and it actually inspired the first chapter of my book of stepping outside your comfort zone, because, and I think, Laurie, you were talking about it too, I remember I moved to California after college, and it was, again, this kind of like, you don't have to do this, but then something in my stomach, like the knot in my stomach said, yes, you do. And people were like, if this is hard for you, why are you doing it? And I'm like, because I want to, and I didn't know at the time, but it was like, I wanted to step outside my comfort zone. I knew there was something there. And that step outside my comfort zone, had led to huge breakthroughs. And then when I saw that magnet and, it kind of, led to the first chapter, it just made me realize like so much of transformative work and so much of the most exciting things that happen in our life start with taking that first step outside your comfort zone. So yeah, I love that.
I love
Definitely.
that, Melissa. Thank you. It's so funny. It's so true what Jonathan said too, like being our authentic self. Like for me, I have a persona, I have an identity that was put on me when I was dubbed the contagiously positive girl. And when I'm angry and frustrated and not being my highest self, I sit there, and the way I be my authentic self is I say, if I was being my highest self right now, like if I am being the contagiously positive girl, how would I react, act, respond? What decision would I make from her? Because she's who I want to be, because she's kind and she's loving and she's compassionate. Whereas when I'm not my highest self, I'm a jerk and, and I'm not kind and compassionate to myself and to others. So I love that's such a good distinction, Jonathan, to like be like, yeah, your authentic self, but who are you at your highest self, right? And to me, I just put an identity to it with the contagiously positive girl, and I can take myself out of it and say, what would she do? Because she's the one that I want to be like, because that's what someone else saw in me that I didn't see in me, right? I needed someone else to bring that out. So it really helps me to react and act in a way. I could still be angry. I don't bypass that, but I don't need to act out on the anger.
Yeah. That was Lorianne, that was a beautiful way to sum up what we've been talking about here tonight. Again, thank you everyone for joining me and for being courageous enough to take part of this, what was essentially an experiment, because like I said, I wasn't sure how this was all going to come together, but I just, when we're courageous, you have to have that faith that no matter what, it's all going to work out. So thank you everyone for joining, not only joining me, but sharing your incredible stories. It means a lot to me. And for all of our listeners, to connect with tonight's guests, make sure to join us at Nectar Growth. You can find us at nectargrowth.com. It's very similar to other social media platforms, but it's a safe place. It's a safe place to connect, to learn, and to grow. And we don't harvest your data or manipulate your news feed so that you only see certain things. It's truly unique. And I encourage everyone just to join, give us a try, see who's there. We're new, we're growing. There's new people joining every day. I mean, think back to other social media platforms when they just started. That's where we are. Just imagine where we're going to be in a year from now. So come join us because you know you're worth it. And thank you everyone for joining me today. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby.